Welcome! In this video we're going to be taking a quick look at Charlotte, an epic grade debuffer class Elune. Now while she is as a debuffer class, she actually can serve the role as a tank, as her stats and skills and passives do allow her to be a pretty effective tank. So let's go ahead and take a look at her base stats. At 6 stars, she's at 45k HP with 5k PDEF and basically 5k MDEF. Her attack at 2.8k does put her at a low end of the attack. Her attack speed at 104 puts her kind of in the mid-range. But her HP, PDEF, and MDEF is pretty high for being at the non-transcended 6-star state, making her pretty good already as a tank. When she's leveled up to the max at +5 though, her HP does go up to a very nice 68k with her PDEF and MDEF ending at about 7.5k each. This means that she can be quite easy to get up to a pretty good amount of PDEF and MDEF as well as very high HP, making her function as a pretty good tank even though she is a debuffer class. Let's go and take a look at some of the skills that she has now. Her first skill is a frontline only skill as typical with most. This deals physical damage and just doesn't do anything else. However, if you do the skill gem set effect on this one, which is red, orange for the physical damage and the crit rate, this one means that if you land a crit, you have a 10% chance to cause despair. As the skill really doesn't do anything else, putting the skill gem set effect on this skill is a decent option, as then at least you have a 10% chance of landing despair if she crits, which isn't too bad, and can actually do something other than just a little damage. When the skill is leveled up to the max, the damage does go up to a decent multiplier, but as she does have low base attack stats, it's not going to be that big of a deal, but it does allow her to do a little extra damage. Looking at her special skill now, this is a single target any enemy skill. This means you can target any enemy on the battlefield and not just the front line or tank. It's a 4 soul skill. It does physical damage and inflicts a provoke for 1 turn at level 1. However, when the skill is leveled up to the max at 6, the damage does go up to a very decent multiplier, but more importantly, the physical effect of provoke goes up to 2 turns. As this is a special skill and can be used all the time, you can potentially provoke multiple enemies for 2 turns, making her pretty good at provoking targets and controlling the battlefield. The skill gem set effect for her, red, orange on this skill for physical, and crit, adds a 5% chance to panic the target for 2 turns. As most other skill gem effects on here wouldn't do too much for this skill, going this 5% chance to panic for 2 turns isn't a bad idea and can help because it can reduce the amount of souls that the enemy has whenever they take a turn. Because of the panic effect itself, it is a very low chance, so you might want to go with extra damage instead with this skill, but considering that her base attack is pretty low, whatever you add to this on the skill gem isn't going to affect the actual damage that it does by a significant amount, so going with the 5% chance to panic is again not too bad of an option for the skill, as it does provide a little bit more usefulness to her on those off chances that you do land that. Looking in at her ultimate skill, now this one is a frontline only skill again. This skill deals physical damage again with a decent multiplier. This skill will affect a weakening effect that reduces the magic defense of the target by, at level 1, 40% of her of her physical defense for 3 turns. As she does have pretty decent physical defense for an epic grade anyway, this is a significant amount of a weaken effect to her magic defense. This means that you would want to pair her with a good magic damage dealer so that that magic damage dealer can do a lot of damage to that enemy once this effect is applied. When this skill is leveled up to the max at +6, the multiplier goes up to a very high 1140 plus 341% of her attack as physical damage. While it is a very high multiplier, her base damage is pretty low. So the damage from this can be decent. But the more important thing is that the weaken effect goes up to 80% of her PDEF and reduces the magic defense of the enemy by 80% of her PDEF, meaning that you can give her really high PDEF and it will reduce the magic defense by a significant amount. And by doing this, you can reduce it so that any magic damage you do to that target can essentially ignore their defense if you reduce it by enough. This is very good for taking out squishies, but again, this is a frontline only, but it can be very effective for taking out tanks, especially if you bring her with good magic damage dealers. Something to bring her with that does a lot of magic damage and that is also maybe an epic grade would be Chloe Van, as Chloe Van does really high multipliers and very good damage anyway. This, with the reduced magic defense of the enemy, can allow you to one-shot even very tanky Elunes. So, keep that in mind. The skill gem effect of this one is Red Indigo Violent for the physical damage, the status of the weakening effect itself, and then the speed. The Indigo is a good option for this one. The skill gem set effect for this skill is a pretty decent thing. It's a 10% chance as it is low, but what it does is it gives her the ability to steal 2 souls from the target. Now, this means that if the enemy team has, say, 4 souls and this procs, this means now they have 2 souls and you gain 2 souls. Even though this takes 6, if you successfully steal, then now it will only reduce your souls by 4 because you used 6 but you gained 2 back because it stole them and not just reduced from the enemy. It reduces them, adds to you. 10% chance is pretty low, so going with, say, a full Indigo set of skill gems on this one to increase that amount of magic damage, magic defense reduction would also be a good idea for this, especially if you plan on pairing her with other magic damage dealers. You can really increase that weakening effect to make it so that they have very, very low magic defense if you go full Indigo set with her. The effect also goes up to 4 turns, meaning that you can do this and not have to do it very often. You can do it one time, and as long as they're not cleansing themselves in any way, then it will last for quite a while, meaning you have a pretty decent amount of time before you would have to reapply it to that tank. Looking in at her first passive, this one, Crest of Punishment. What this does is whenever she is attacked, it inflicts a soul effect called Crest of Punishment for 2 turns on the person that attacked her. Crest of Punishment reduces all resistance rates of that enemy that has this debuff by 10%. When hit by a crit, if she is crit, then it increases it. Then it adds 2 Crests of Punishments. You can have up to 5 of them stacked on a target, each one applying a 10% reduction to resistance rates, meaning that it's easier for you to land or your teammates to land those different debuffs on them because the resistances will be reduced. This means that if they have 5 Crests of Punishments, then they have a 50% reduction in resistance, which is significant. This means that your team, including her, has a very good chance of landing those debuffs, even against high resistance Elunes. Her second passive, this reduces the damage she receives by 20% if she's attacked by an enemy with a resistance rate below 20%. As her first passive puts on a soul effect debuff that reduces the resistance rate, and for a lot of the Elunes that will be attacking her, especially your damage dealers, the DPS, they're not going to have very high resistance rate anyway, and the 10% should be enough to put them below the 20% resistance rate. In that case, the damage that she takes will be reduced by 20% when she is attacked from those enemies after they have that first passive Crest of Punishment on them. This is good though, as it does make her tankier because she can reduce the damage she receives by 20%. The third passive of this one helps her to take less damage as well. This one, if your team does have a debuff on them, each debuff that they have on the enemies is added up. So for example, if you're fighting something like an Arslan that will apply a evasion debuff to your team as an AoE, that's 5 of those debuffs to your entire team of 5, for example. This would mean 5 debuffs for your team. She will now reduce the damage that she takes by 25%, meaning that she takes 25% less damage all the time, as the Arslan buff doesn't go away because it is a infinite turn thing because it's part of his passive. But for any other debuff on any on any of your allies, she just reduces the damage that she receives by 5% for each one. This means if you're going up against a heavy debuff team, she could potentially reduce the damage by so much that she takes essentially no damage as a tank, especially useful in the front line. These skills that reduce the damage that she takes, her second and third passive, as well as just her overall base stats anyway being pretty good for an epic, does make her a good epic tank, even though she is a debuffer class. She does apply good debuffs, especially with her ultimate skill doing the weaken effect to the magic defense, allowing your magic damage dealers to do significant damage, but also her special skill doing a physical effect that provokes the target for up to 2 turns. This means that she can be useful as a tank, and she is quite tanky. So if you're looking for a tank or something to use, she would be good for those roles. Now, for a gear or for the Dimension Slate options for her, for Charlotte, the gear that you would want to go with is going to be probably something that's going to be typical for a tank. Whereas you can't put on the tank literature sets for her, you can still go with other tank gear that can help her out. Even going with the debuff gear, except for the offhand where you might want to give her HP instead, she can still do good. However, if with her base stats being pretty high, you can go with the debuffer offhand for the attack, as she does do some attack damage also. However, with her base attack being pretty low, she's not going to be a significant source of damage for you. You would probably want to focus on anything for her that makes her tankier. Physical defense, magic defense, and HP are going to be your primary things. Some accuracy, which would help, even though she does reduce the resistances of the enemies. You would still want some accuracy on her, but any resistances you can give to her, since she's probably going to be used as a tank in many situations, you'd want to give her some resistances too. Speed isn't too important on her, though you do want her to have a little bit, so if you can get some speed, go ahead and get it, but I wouldn't make it a priority for her, as most of her other tankiness type effects is going to be what you're going to want to aim for with her. For PvE, she can be useful as a tank, but in many situations they're just going to be a lot better tanks. So she's not going to be as useful in PvE for many situations as a tank. Now for PvP as a tank, in air battles, she's not going to be as useful because a lot of the enemies just have really high damage. You're going to be facing a lot of legendaries there that are just going to be able to destroy her pretty quick. However, as a tank for Underground Arena, UGD Arena, she would be good there. As she doesn't take up too much merit, she has a pretty low merit amount requirement. You can bring her and then pair her with a high magic damage dealer such as Chloe Van, and then with her ultimate skill and stuff, they can have a really good chance of just killing off an enemy Elune very quickly, as well as her having the ability to provoke or reduce her damage. It can be quite helpful with her taking out enemy teams or just working as a tank. So also for Underground Arena, if you're looking for to complete one of those extra quests to get the increase in rewards, if you have one that says complete the battle or win the battle without a tank Elune, then you can bring Charlotte instead as your tank, as she does do the tank role quite well. You can bring her in instead as a tank and use her for those situations too. She can also be used in that role if you're doing the daily boss battles where you're needing to bring in say multiple debuffers or something. Then you can bring her in as your tank for that, and she can do good debuff. Plus, with the ability to reduce the magic defense of the boss, this allows your team to go full magic damage on it, and they can just nuke down the boss very quickly with magic damage, with her reducing their magic defense by a lot. Other things for the boss battles too, if you're in this situation where it says, okay, hey, you can't bring a tank, then you can bring Charlotte instead as a tank for that situation where you can't normally bring tanks. So she does have some PvE usefulness. However, I think her main usefulness is probably going to be in the Underground Arena, where she would work quite well there, both for offense and defense teams, as even on defense she's going to work pretty good even if you can't control her, just because her base stats and skills and passives are going to work quite well anyway. You just need to make sure that you put her with some good magic damage dealers so that when she does use her ultimate, they'll be able to capitalize on that. Anyway, that's going to be it for this one. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below and I'll answer them as soon as I can. Thank you.